Our very own multimedia journalist Jerusha, Sukhdeo and Nielen Klerk are joining us in studio. They've just come back from a very emotional trip starting on Tuesday in Johannesburg at the State Memorial for former President Nelson Mandela, and then going to view his body lying in state in Pretoria. It's really great to have you guys back. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Well, we've heard a lot of reports in the media about the State Memorial. Can you just take us through what it was like being there?
Well, it was incredibly rainy. There were a lot of people. I mean, stands were half full, but it's still thousands and thousands and thousands of people chanting. So it was chaos. It felt like chaos.
Keep in mind, around 90,000 people can fit into Soccer City. That's an incredible amount of people. And considering that the top tier of the stands were completely full with singing and dancing people, there were tens of thousands of people there.
Do you think the memorial did Mandela's life justice?
Nothing could do Mandela's life justice, of course. Yeah. Nothing. We could have had a packed stadium, we could have had 10 packed stadiums, we could have had every world leader there. Nothing would have done his life justice. But I do think the city of Johannesburg tried. They didn't get a lot right, but they tried.
Yeah, I think it would be quite easy to focus on everything that went wrong. I mean, security wasn't top-notch. There was no backup plan for extreme rain. People were stuck at bus stops. But yeah, they tried. There were a lot of positives there. I mean, the organization that goes into getting 91 heads of state is incredible, and they got all of those people there. Yeah, I think kudos to that.
Well, you did say that 91 heads of state were there, but the security wasn't that great. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, for example, media got there quite early, of course, and we have a lot of equipment that we carried with us. Now, none of that was searched. People entering and leaving the stadium were not searched. No one looked in our bags. In fact, nobody even checked to see what was in our pockets. Wow. And it's very providential that nothing happened on the day, but it would have been very easy for something to go horribly wrong, considering there was almost no filtering of who was entering the stadium.
Yeah, at some stage I thought maybe it's just because we were media, but there was a stage during the day where all the presidents and dignitaries were arriving, and I managed to sneak down, and there was nobody else there at that stage. They were chased away. And I was 2 meters away from all these world leaders, you know, Mugabe, Ellen Sirleaf, okay, just not Obama, but everybody. And I was like, if I were a mass murderer faking being a photographer / journalist, you know, this would be very easy for me. And that was very worrying. It could have easily have become something else. Yeah, I don't know what the security was like on the buses, though. I cannot speak for everyone, but yeah, it was quite lax. We had more security at the lying in state. That was crazy. It felt like I was searched the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I went to the Cape Town Memorial, and I had the same experience. There wasn't any security there. I didn't get searched when I went in. I went in with a backpack and equipment, so.
It's quite strange.
Yeah.
I would be very curious to know why that was particularly lax.
Especially when there's such, I know there weren't heads of state at the Cape Town celebration, but there were thousands and thousands of people there, such large gatherings. I don't know, it would be interesting to find out. I want to talk about the general feeling at the memorial. Was it a feeling of celebration? Was it very somber?
I must say that I think there were different types of feelings throughout the day. For the rest of my life, I'll remember standing up with fellow South Africans, and the sky was grey. It was unseasonably rainy for Johannesburg in summer. You know, Johannesburg usually experiences thunderstorms in the late afternoon, but this was sort of consistent rain throughout the day. And the skies had opened up and it was pouring down with rain, and we all got up and sang the national anthem. I'll probably tell my future children about that moment, and I felt incredibly proud to be a part of that. And then as the day went on, there was suddenly this complete surreal feeling of, is Zuma being booed? When that happened, I was standing with our editor, Dan Calderwood, and we looked at each other and said, is this really happening? Are we hearing this wrong? So we were shocked. And then, of course, it went on to feeling very inspired again. We felt very inspired by hearing the likes of Obama give that completely touching speech. And then puzzled again when our president chose to make his speech very focused on the ANC and what the ANC had done instead of what this man had done for us. Personally, I found that a bit sort of wrong place, wrong time.
I mean, it was a long day. We were there since, 7 o'clock in the morning, and we left at 5. You go from being exceptionally happy to very sad to wet and frustrated, and there's a bit of everything, and I think a lot of people experienced a bit of everything. I mean, if you was waiting for a bus for an hour and it didn't show up, you'd be incredibly frustrated, but still touched and still determined to be there. It was amazing to see us all come together as South Africans, and I think South Africans do that well. We get together and we unite. Our unity is a strong point.
Yeah, and you know, there isn't much that unites South Africans. We disagree on everything. But Nelson Mandela is the one thing that unifies us. And that was incredible to experience.
It sounds like it was obviously once in a lifetime experience, something you'll remember for the rest of your lives and tell your children and grandchildren.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about media coverage. There's, Jerem actually released a cartoon today that kind of depicts all the media attention that the Obama selfie got, and Zuma's boos, and the traffic and the weather, like we touched on a little bit earlier. Do you think these things overshadowed the real reason why everyone was gathered at the stadium for?
It's a good question. I think to an extent, yes. For me, definitely. Until the next morning when we went to the procession, I was out of focus. I forgot sort of the reason until I got to the procession, and I was like, wow, this is for Nelson Mandela. Where it becomes a show, at the memorial itself, you know, it becomes, there are so many issues, so many frustrations. So I think definitely to an extent.
It's been said a lot, but I do feel that Barack Obama's speech perhaps centered everybody again and brought us back. And there were many other dignitaries who spoke from the heart about Madiba. But there was a lot of distraction. But I suppose that's the joy of being South African. There's always something interesting happening. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I want to touch on the procession leading from one military hospital to the Union buildings. Were you present for that?
We were, and we'd positioned ourselves right outside the entrance to the Union buildings. So we were waiting there. And there were a great many people singing and dancing, a lot of media. There were people in the trees. Pretoria is full of beautiful jacaranda trees, and there were people up in the trees with phones, there were children. But nothing could have prepared me for that hearse. I was right in front. Nielen and I were right in the front of a group of photographers. And there was a huge, I suppose it's a fleet of motorbikes. I don't know what the correct collective noun is. And that followed the hearse. So there were soldiers everywhere, and this huge fleet of motorcycles came past, and then this black vehicle carrying his coffin.
I just got shivers just from you explaining that.
It was something else with this flag covering it, and well, I've never seen journalists cry like that. Everyone was just tearing up, and once the adrenaline of getting the photograph and sending that back to the office quickly had subsided, I was left with this feeling of that was our president. That was our president who was driven past me in a casket. The memorial the day before was incredibly moving, but seeing that casket driven past into the Union buildings was indescribable.
Yeah, there was this moment after, in my mind, that's what I will remember for always. It was this moment of like 3 minutes after the hearse went past, where I think everyone was just, you know, struck and stunned by the enormity of the thing. Yeah. So we had, it almost felt like these big South African moments where, you know, with the World Cup in 1995 or whatever, and just suddenly like, this is magic, yeah? People were chanting, not chanting for the camera and not singing for the camera, but just because they were so touched. And I'll always remember this guy with this yellow rose just singing there in a group of people, and it was amazing. And I saw this man, this black woman teaching this white boy how to dance, and nobody was watching them. It was just because they were so touched by this moment, and I was like, this is incredible. And those 3 minutes, that was magic.
I want to talk about actually viewing the body lying in state now. So the coffin has come through, draped in the beautiful South African flag, and now he's lying there. Can you tell me about the process, what it was like actually going up and seeing his body resting at peace?
Well, up until this point we were working, and we were working very, very hard to, we're multimedia journalists, so we were filing video and photographs and tweeting and Facebooking, and a lot of our minds were occupied. A lot of us, we were completely busy. But when we went to view his body, there was none of that. You weren't allowed to take photographs, and you weren't allowed to take any sort of equipment with you. And then we were at a point where we were doing this for ourselves. It was just a South African citizen going to view his body. And our editor, Dan, and I were one of the first people from the public after the dignitaries had gone. We were number 11 and number 12 in the queue to view Nelson Mandela's body. And before we walked in, Dan said to me, are you prepared to see him? And I sort of brushed it off. I didn't really realize how I could be prepared, but there was no preparing for that moment. Seeing him lying there, he looked beautiful. He didn't look sick. He looked like the Mandela that we knew. And when I realized that he was wearing one of his trademark Madiba shirts, I completely lost it. I sobbed and sobbed, and when I went back and got my cell phone, my entire family, a lot of them who were in Durban, had seen me on television. My little breakdown had been broadcast to the entire world, and they were all messaging to find out if I was okay.
And so we've all seen it now.
But I wish I could explain to you what I felt in that moment, Jen, but I can't, because I'm getting married in February, and I'm getting married to an Afrikaans man. And in that moment, I realized that my life and my future family and all of our plans and our dreams for our future and our marriage and our children, without him, would have been impossible. I could never be sitting here with my colleague. I could, he made this possible, and to see him lying there, I felt such gratitude and love for him.
That sounds like it was quite an emotional experience. Nielen, do you want to tell us what it was like for you to go through and see Mandela's body lying in state?
It definitely takes some time to get there, so you sort of reflect on what you're doing. And while I was walking up, it struck me the people there with me. Old ladies who've traveled who knows where. They were struggling to walk. I remember I just asked this woman, can I, help her, hold her hand? She was like, no, I'm going to do this myself. And it goes quite quickly. I mean, you go past his body and it's like 3 or 4 seconds. But I remember walking past and I was thinking, I will never forget this face. I thought he looked serene. He looked, the past few months that we saw pictures of him, he looked gaunt and almost, I can't say unhappy, but sick. And when we walked past him now, I was like, he looks still. He looks, I felt fine with this.
It was our Madiba.
It was our Madiba. And then, with the shirt and everything. And I'll still be struck by the emotions of people when I walked past. That was my big thing. When I went down, we were still not allowed with the cameras and stuff, but I just saw these masses of people just breaking out into tears and being consoled, like, again, across race. And it was amazing.
Supporting each other.
And that's when I started crying. Yeah. And this poor woman was like, no, Cece, don't cry. And I was like, no, I can't remember. So, yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. The one thing that I will always remember from viewing his casket was there's a little black girl and her mom, and she was in head-to-toe pink, and she was thrilled to be here. Where the adults around her were quite somber, she skipped up to the casket and sort of looked in and smiled, and then looked up at her mom and grinned at her mom as if to sort of say,
Wow.
look at who we're looking at. And when she looked up at her mother completely broke down, just completely broke down in tears and had to be helped to move along in this, we were all in a line. And I will always remember that this mom being able to walk there with her daughter and knowing that, this child's future is brighter because of the man lying there.
An interesting fact, sorry to just touch upon that, is that I've noticed a lot of people, they pass by and they don't necessarily look. They go through all the effort, the hours of standing, and when you get to viewing the body, they just walk on. And I understand that, because you understand the presence, you understand this moment you're going through, but you don't want to see the body. And I know it's probably almost impossible to get to the casket now, but I would encourage anyone to go. It's unforgettable. It's worth waiting there for hours.
It is.
Well, you two were involved in a great moment in history and will be remembered forever. How do South African citizens move on from here?
It was so recently that I wish I knew, but it sounds almost cliched to say, but I really do believe that, continuing the spirit of Madiba, continuing in, upholding all those principles that he stood for and fought for and went to prison for is really our responsibility now. And then I think we probably have a big responsibility to tell our children and to never let his memory fade.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that there was someone like that on Earth. It was possible to unite a nation. And yeah, like Jerusha said, it's very cliched, but to look back at what he did and tell other people about it, our kids, and
yeah. The thing that we really noticed over the last few days is that Nelson Mandela was a man. He wasn't a god, and he wasn't some mythical creature. He was a man, and he had struggles and he had pain.
Here amongst us.
Right. He was just human, and we probably will never see another Nelson Mandela, but we all have the potential to make differences like he did. He was just human like us, and we now have the responsibility to live out his legacy.
And I think an important thing as well in Madiba's legacy is not to settle for less. I think we all get caught up in the whole airy-fairy love thing as well, but Mandela strived for a better future for us as South Africans. And he worked at doing that, and we should, aim for that too. We shouldn't just take what we get. We should work at it.